So when I was 19 years old, I started selling Cutco cutlery to lay the foundation here. In my first 10 days, and important, I think, this is another piece I was almost going to start with this when you said, like, take us back.
Yeah.
That my whole life I was very mediocre at everything I did. I think that's an important piece. Like, I didn't get good grades. I wasn't an athlete. I wasn't popular. And I say that because I think it's important. I think often we see people that are, successful in whatever regard we would deem them successful. We maybe assume that they've always been that way, or and I know people like John, my friend John Burgup. Do you know John?
Yeah, I do.
Right, so John's one of those people that he's just good at. He got great grades. He was the best golfer, and right, he's one of those people that's great at everything he's ever done, and he just kind of what he touches turns to gold. And
I hate those people.
I hate those people, right? I literally say that all the time. I tell John right to his face.
Yeah.
I hate people like you. So when I started selling Cutco, it was my second day of training where I found out about the all-time record that had been broken, and I was like, why not me? And I think that's one of those, if you're listening to this right now, one of those important beliefs to embody is if another human being has done something, it doesn't mean they're better than you. It means they either learned or did something different than you. And if you learn what they learned and do what they did, you'll get very similar results. So in that second day training, I was like, if the girl that had just broken the all-time 50-year-old company record happened to be 3 weeks prior, 30 minutes south of where I lived, right? So I was like, if she could do it, why not me? Mm-hmm. So anyway, I go on, I break the record, and then a year and a half later, I'm giving a speech teaching people how to, do what I did or whatever. And driving home that night I was in a Ford Mustang, a Chevy full-size truck hit me head-on at 80 miles an hour. It sent my car spinning into oncoming traffic, which was actually the worst was yet to come. The head-on, airbag protected me. I'm not sure what injuries may or may not have happened. But I spun around, and the car behind me T-boned me at 70 miles an hour. And I immediately, if you can imagine hitting your driver's side door at 70, right? The whole door crushed the left side of my body, and I broke 11 bones. I broke my femur, my leg broke in half, my pelvis broke in 3 places, my arm broke in 2 pieces, shattered my elbow, shattered 3 bones around my eye. Doctors thought I'd be blind in that eye. My ear was almost completely severed. The top of the ceiling buckled, and it sliced a big V into the top of my head. And I was immediately in a coma. Thank God. I couldn't withstand the pain, and thank God our body has that mechanism. And then it took an hour to pull me out of the car. I bled so much that I bled out, and I was clinically dead when they pulled me out of the car. My heart had stopped beating. I obviously wasn't breathing. And according to police reports or paramedic reports, whatever, I was dead for approximately 6 minutes. And then they put me on a helicopter, used the electricity, what's that called, defibrillators, shot me back to life, and I spent the next 6 days in a coma. Flatlined twice more, which my poor parents, they'd lost their youngest. Now they're laying, at my bedside looking at me hooked up to ventilator or hooked up to, life support, right? And then I'm flatlining, they're getting cleared out of the room. Oh, he's dying again, right? Mom and dad, I feel so they had it harder than me. But I came out of the coma 6 days later, and they said I would never walk again. I had permanent brain damage. I have metal rods through my arm, my leg, on and on. And within a few days, actually, it was a week after I came out of the coma, the doctors called my parents in and they said, we're concerned with Hal. We believe he's in denial because he's always smiling and laughing and joking. And that's not normal for a young person or any person that has had this happen. And so my dad came in and he told me the doctor's concerns. And I shared with him one of the most important lessons I've ever learned in my life. I said, Dad, remember I live my life by the 5-minute rule. He said, remind me what that means. And I said, I learned it in my Cutco training. It states that when something goes wrong in life, it's okay to be negative, to get angry, upset, feel your emotions, but there's no value in dwelling on something that is now out of your control. It's in the past. You can't change it. And a lot of people are suffering over things that happened not 5 minutes ago, but 5 decades ago, right? It's not happening anymore. It's our thoughts about it that's happening. And so we were taught that you set your timer for 5 minutes, and when the timer goes off, you say 3 words, can't change it. Powerful words. It's an acknowledgement. I always accompany it with a deep breath. Can't change it. I can't change what happened 5 minutes ago. So I can either sit here and continue to be miserable and angry and upset and frustrated and pissed, right? But is that serving me? Usually, no. Or I can choose to be accepted exactly as it is, accept my life and what happened 5 minutes ago. This is my new reality. and I get to choose how I deal with it. And I can either be miserable or I can be at peace and move forward. And I said, Dad, I can't change that I was in a car accident. I broke 11 bones and doctors say I'll never walk again. But I can choose to be the happiest, most grateful person I've ever been while I endure the most difficult time in my life. And for anybody watching or listening, like, consider that the most difficult time in your life, let alone inconveniences or arguments with your spouse or, financial challenges. I mean, right, we've been through it all. You can choose. It's not mutually exclusive. You can go through difficult times, and to me, the more difficult the time, the greater the opportunity to develop my ability to be at peace with reality exactly as it is.
That's beautiful, man. Do you remember anything from the coma time, or about, do you remember any of that?
No. There's 2 weeks of my life that I have zero memory. My last memory is like getting on the freeway that night. And then my first memory is basically that conversation that I just shared that I had with my dad. And even that's fuzzy. It's actually interesting. It's very, I don't know where real memories begin and stories that my mom and dad and sister and friends have told me from that time. I really, it's very hard for me to know when I actually started to remember again.
Yeah, memory is a funny thing anyway. Have you ever listened to that podcast? Who's the guy that wrote The Tipping Point? Malcolm Gladwell.
Yeah.
So he's got a podcast on memory. One of his I can't remember.
One of his episodes?
Yeah, one of his episodes.
Okay.
Yeah, one of his episodes is on memory. I can't remember the name of the even show, but Malcolm Gladwell has a show, Revisionist History, I think is what it's called. Anyway, and it's on Brian Williams, the guy from NBC, who said he was in a helicopter getting shot at in Iraq, and then it comes out later that he really wasn't. And it's all people are like, he's a liar. And so the whole episode, like an hour-long thing, was probably the most fascinating podcast I've ever listened to. It's all about how our memories are sliced in with images from TV, news, and other people's stories. And so it's almost like if your mind is one of those old-fashioned projectors that has all the slides, we just remove slides and put new slides in all the time. And they did a study, and I don't remember the exact percentage. It was basically like the majority of what people remembered 10 years later about 9/11 was not true. And they did this study based on people's journaling, people who journaled that day and then didn't look at their journal afterwards. Yeah. But they wrote very detailed what happened that day. And then they asked them 10 years later to recount what happened to them that day. Yeah. And over 50% of their memories were wrong about their own experience. Right? Yeah. And so it makes me question, it's just funny that you brought that up, is almost everything now I think about my past. I will swear all day up and down, that happened to me. I remember it. It was true. But was it?
Yeah.